Welcome to the ZNL Podcast, a podcast brought to you by ZN, the OG digital agency in Brussels.
Hello and welcome to this episode of ZNL. I am very happy to have a guest, Gökşen, who is a very experienced journalist, communicator, and somebody who's been involved in quite a few different things. So welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Philip. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, but exciting times, a lot of news, a lot of complicated stories happening, and we're going to talk about storytelling. So Gökşen, you've been in Brussels for about 10, 15 years, I believe, and you've had...
No. I think it's going to be 8 years only.
8
but
years,
it feels like as long as 15 years, I can tell.
Okay, so you've had a career ranging from journalism to even some translation, as well as you're involved in a lot of organizations, some local organizations, and you work for Euractiv. So maybe my first question is, as somebody with an international background who has landed in Brussels 8 years ago, what brought you here and why did you get stuck in Brussels?
I wouldn't frame it as stuck because I'm here with all my passion and love for this city. But jokes aside, I think stars aligned in a way for me to come to Brussels. First of all, due to my father's profession, who was a public servant with some diplomatic roles at times, we frequently moved from one place to the other, both within Turkey and also abroad, especially in the Central Asian region, almost every 2 years. So while we were moving to new places, I was always like this new girl in the school, in the neighborhood, etc. And I remember the pain I was kind of going through every single time that I had to explain myself, where I come from, why I am there, and explain myself to the locals who never moved anywhere else. So I was, as a kid, craving for a place where I could be surrounded by international community with foreigners around me. That's why I decided to study actually international relations to become a diplomat at the end of the day. But during my studies, I realized that if I were to pursue a public service career, I wouldn't be fitting well in this overly hierarchical system. I could see it from my father's life and from other family, friends, etc. I felt like this wouldn't be the right place to go. But the question was what I was going to do if I'm not to pursue the public service. So initially, I didn't know what to do. But I remember at the age of like 20 or something, I came up with three key elements that I was going to be looking for in any professional journey. One was doing something with a purpose, with a social impact. The second thing was a constant learning, lifelong learning experience, like growth opportunity. And the third element was creativity. So I didn't know what exactly I would do, but I was going to be looking for these three things. And when I finished my bachelor's degree, I had a scholarship from the European Commission to study in London. And I did my master's degree on communication policy studies. So that was the moment, we're talking about almost 20 years ago, that was the moment that we started to see the social media emerging, particularly with Facebook and YouTube. And that was also the moment when the online, like digital media, was also becoming a kind of a new thing. And I did my master's, and my very first job was to work for an online media covering EU-Turkey relations from Istanbul. So that was kind of my entry point to Brussels. Again, we're talking about, I think, 16 years ago, first time I landed in the city. And when I landed, I realized that maybe this is the place that I was dreaming of, as a kid, because I was surrounded by all the international community and people coming from different places. I did not move the city immediately. So I was coming to visit for the summits and, twice, 3 times per year. This is how I started to have kind of this network of Bruxellaires around me. And it was 2017, I received a job offer from Euractiv to join their business team. So a few years of journalistic experience actually kind of taught me a lot of things that we can delve into at a later stage. But after that, writing experience, I realized that writing is not necessarily my core strength nor my passion. That's why I decided to move to another area of media business, focusing on the commercial activity. So when I joined Brussels, Euractiv's Brussels team in 2017, I was invited to be part of the business department. And since then, I've been here. Currently, I'm working as a senior B2B advisor for Euractiv's advocacy lab. I also do some training on media relations on the side, and help organizations basically communicate their messages, their campaigns, activities to the core target audiences. And in addition to that, I am also actively participating in local life through fellowships, through volunteering activities, and I feel like Brussels is now home to me.
So you came to Brussels, and you said you had been a few times. I'm just curious a bit about, what was your first idea of what Brussels might be, and when did you decide to make Brussels your home? I mean, what made you decide,
Very good
okay, I'm
question.
going to stay here?
Very good question. I think my very first I did not have, big expectations or any, high hopes, I think, literally, because I studied the EU during my bachelor's degree. While studying international relations, EU was my focus. And I did my master's on communication policy studies, but also specifically focusing on EU's telecoms policies, etc. So EU has always been this, supranational organization with lots of, regulatory complex, structures and so on. So I studied the theory first before I landed in Brussels and faced the realities. I must say, in the beginning, I did not really realize how things were functioning. I was just here to report on things. I didn't
Mhm.
necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of the complexity of the policy making. It was only when I moved to Brussels I started to realize how they are functioning, and sometimes with excitement, sometimes with a lot of disappointment. But the question about when I felt Brussels home, I think 6 months after I arrived, I think the first 6 months was the exploratory phase for me. And I remember I did not even close my apartment in Istanbul then, because I thought maybe I will not like it, particularly because I've mainly lived my life in big cities in Turkey, let's say Istanbul, Ankara. I spent time in London, and I traveled around, and I always enjoyed big, crowded, chaotic cities. So I remember when I first decided to move to Brussels, my friends in Istanbul were kind of joking about the fact that I'm moving to a village compared
Mm.
to Istanbul. And I think first 6 months was painful, I must admit, to really adapt the city, the weather, and also the small scale of the city. But then after 6 months, I think the weather started to get better. I started to make a kind of bigger network. I really enjoyed this international vibe, and also the fact that Belgium does not necessarily impose the Belgian culture on you immediately.
Mhm.
So it took a bit of time for me to fully settle in and feel the actual vibe of the city. But I think a year after, I knew that I would stay here. It was also the combination of enjoying the city and enjoying what I do at work. So I think stars aligned in that sense. And after 1 year, I already knew that I would stay as long as it is possible. And 5 years later, I also decided to pursue the long-term stay and the nationality. And I took the steps for that, and it's been 2 years since I got the Belgian nationality too. So I can really say that I'm a Bruxelloise now.
Very good. No, it's very interesting because I think what you described is something that a lot of people from the international community feel when they come to Brussels, is that they don't really know what to expect. It is a village with uh, complicated levels of population that have different lives, but there is this, I think, community, international community, that feels at home, and that basically, exists with quite a large group of people. And I think some of the activities that you've been involved with, including Restless Brussels, And I think there's a lot more of this kind of bringing the international community together, not just on work things, but also to just look at how to make the city a better place. Now, you talked about the EU. You were observing the EU as a journalist. Now you're in the middle of the kind of conversation. I mean, the EU is this very complicated, slightly abstract story, and I think it's something that has had different challenges over the last decades. And at some point, I think it used to be okay. People don't understand it. It's remote. It's abstract. I think now people have maybe the preconception of the EU is that people are attached to certain parts of it, but there's also a very negative idea of this bureaucracy. So what do you think the image that people outside of Brussels have of the EU, and what would you say is the main challenge of the institutions or of the people who believe in the EU as an idea or as a project? What do they have to overcome to get that story out there?
Well, it's kind of a million euro question, if not billion, I feel like it is absolutely so complex to comprehend, especially for those who are not coming from, the EU bubble itself. I see there are great efforts by the institutions to kind of close this gap of understanding through, various channels, online, offline, through advertising, collaborations with influencers, using media to make sure that the EU is more accessible and closer to the citizens. Is this enough? I don't think so. I've recently come across this European Parliament's winter 2025 barometer, if I'm not mistaken. The title was that.
Mhm.
And there was this percentage, I think 74% of the citizens think that their country benefits from EU membership. And more importantly, 9 in 10, if I'm not mistaken, EU citizens say that EU member states should act more united to face current global challenges. So there is clear, according to this survey, there is clear appetite for the citizens to get to understand the EU better, but there is obviously a still disconnect between the policies adopted and public understanding of it. The EU itself, the media itself play an important role there, and I will come to that. But I mean, looking at this disconnect, we can even see it in Brussels city itself, right? The people spending most of their times in Schumann and Place Lux area, and the ones outside this periphery, is living complete different reality. So even in our city itself, there is this disconnect. What is missing for me is not necessarily the information, but more relatable storytelling, I think, that connects policies to people's everyday lives. And this gap, in a way, limits public engagement and creates this mistrust, even when the policies are actually designed with the citizens' interests in mind. I feel a lot of the realities also depend on the national landscape, how the member state governments, approach the EU project, how much they embrace the EU identity, and what sort of narratives are dominant on the national media landscape. News being unfortunately associated with negative incidents mostly, crises, wars, etc., or developments that would impact the local or national people negatively are the ones that are being more kind of boosted, highlighted, etc. But that also puts people off. Looking at the media's role in the whole picture is, of course, I'm more familiar with the EU bubble itself, and we see a huge kind of diversity of media in the bubble. Some are, from the EU policy media to national media to trade media, international media. The key is that they all have a different purpose and different target audience. You cannot really expect an EU policy media to cover the sensitivities of a national audience, right? So I think there is no one-stop shop to be able to close the gap of understanding between policymakers and citizens. But I think the responsibility is on the shoulders of not only institutions, but also national governments, their education systems, and the media, and all sorts of media, I feel.
Yeah, but you mentioned at the beginning, and I think this is something that people in Brussels feel very strongly. Like Europe is complicated, and
Mhm.
the bubble media, your active Politico, the main channels, talk about a lot of these complex issues, and they often, I feel, really address the bubble. So
Mhm.
it's the
Mhm.
bubble and beyond, but it's not for ordinary people who don't have an interest of inside the EU. Now, for me, what's missing in this is the EU story that
Mhm.
could really connect emotionally with the European citizens at large. And I know the Commission comes up with the occasional video and the campaign, the kind of one line, but I feel that there's a real gap, and there's a real missing piece of the story, because at the end you need to, give the story of the EU some flesh and
Yeah.
some real emotion. And I don't know. I guess this story, I think, should come from here, because the people who are, who buy into this have to tell the story to their to the people from their countries, and to Europe at large. I mean, so coming back to the question, who do you think should be the main storyteller of the EU, and what should they say to get people, beyond the policy? Because nobody really cares about the details of the policy, especially at a public level. So, how would you kind of tell the EU story in a, you know, I was going to say tweetable, but
Mhm.
maybe TikTokable 30-second clip. So I mean, is it the EU? Is it Ursula von der Leyen? Who else can tell the story of the EU, and what should the heart of that story be in your mind?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm looking at, first of all, the role of media. I mean, the definition of media for me is, you know, at its best, media help both citizens and policymakers make
Hmm.
sense of their environment by providing the information and context. But media is, as I said, so fragmented. You cannot expect every single type of media to provide the same level of the understanding or explanation, because they all target different audiences. So responsibility is on the policymakers for sure, finding ways for people to be able to connect on emotional level, maybe they would feel related to what is happening on EU level. But the responsibility is all on the media, and we can deep dive into it, what media can do on different levels. But the responsibility is also on the citizens in a way to really show the impact of what is decided on EU level in their day-to-day lives. And again, media will and should, I think, focus on providing that kind of stories where people can really show what is exactly happening in their day-to-day life. So basically technical, like connecting the technical world of policymaking to the real life realities of people, not just by reporting what institutions do, but by contextualizing the decision and amplifying the voices that are impacted and affected by what is happening. I mean, social media, I believe, plays a huge role in this,
Hmm.
for many reasons. I mean, there is direct communication that you can do through social media between the policymakers and citizens, but also you got to be careful, I believe, there, because you know the reality is very complex. These platforms are engineered for engagement, for clicks and views, and not necessarily for people to understand or make sense. So while EU can put out this accurate, well-crafted messages, those can easily be drawn out by more provocative, misleading content, and that is usually the case during crises or emotionally charged debates. And I also see sometimes institutions trying to get on the wagon of, popular trends on TikTok, on other social media channels to be more relatable. But that's also, I believe, tricky from time to time. And I think we recently all seen this unfortunate example of the Commissioner Haja Labib's interpretation of what is in my bag format, right? And that created a little bit of a crisis. I think I really highly recommend everyone to look at, social media not as a box to tick by just doing it, but I really think that we should be paying more attention to the current context, the sentiment of the audience, the balance between keeping things real and serious when necessary, while offering content that's easy to understand and relate. It's not an easy job. So I feel everyone, including yourselves, dealing with this every single day. The way forward, I believe, is to really become better listeners on social media, and more tailored grassroots communication strategies wrapped up with more creative mindset, I believe, would be the way to go. But it's not an easy task. That I am 150% sure.
Yeah, so I want to go into this question about the future of journalism because basically, there's been a debate in the US after the election where people said, look, traditional media doesn't really matter that much anymore, and the audience is gravitating towards long form podcasts, TikTok, different social media channels. And in fact, I think a lot of studies are showing that young people are getting their news from these platforms, so from TikTok, etc. So whether we like it or not, these
Absolutely.
new channels are emerging. People are saying that Trump gave his interview to Joe Rogan, and that helped him with young audiences. Again, it's a metaphor for reaching out to these influencers, these
Mhm,
podcasters.
mhm,
And so, my question to you is well, do you think that we're moving towards a world where social channels become the prime source of news for people? Again, before judging whether this is a good or bad thing.
yeah.
And what do journalists need to do? Because we're seeing this with the EU influencer. A lot of journalists are also influencers in their own right. They have often a Substack, a podcast, different kind of channels. And I'm seeing that with Dave Keating, who's actually getting more and more active. So instead of having I'm watching this channel, I'm watching this person, and I'm
Mhm, mhm.
following them on their channel, getting their story. So do you see that switch? I think it's happened more extremely in the US. Do you think it's
Mhm.
going to happen to Brussels? Because Brussels is still dominated by these kind of media players. But what do you think about the transition, and how do you see the future of journalism and their channels?
Mhm. I wouldn't really want to speak on behalf of the journalist just because I'm no longer on the editorial side, but I'll tell you
Mhm.
how I see things evolving. And I think it is really important to put things into a context here, why we are where we are now. And I can tell you it has a lot to do with business side of media. I'm not saying this because I'm on the media business side and maybe a little bit more obsessed with revenue models, business models, etc. But it really is the case. So I'll try to maybe simplify the chain of events. So every major development in information technologies disrupted news media landscape, right? It was with first print, and then came radio, TV, internet. And with the internet, traditional media has never been pressured to transform to from print to digital. The pace of the change and the pressure of change was immense. While these outlets tried to figure out their new digital subscription models, they started to heavily rely on advertising. However, advertising got disrupted by big tech platforms, particularly Google and Facebook, as they increasingly captured dominant positions in the ad market by owning data, the algorithms, etc. And we witnessed that the news media advertising revenue, depending on these platforms, did not necessarily continue to increase so long, and easily on top got disrupted by major economic and political crises in the world. So this caused this economically weakened media landscape. And
Mhm.
this weakened situation attracted the attention of powerful actors from political and business spheres. And these people started to buy traditional media. So, on the editorial side, editors, journalists, reporters who wanted to do independent work or investigative journalism could no longer find themselves a space. Some left. Some even put in jail in certain countries for their controversial, stance. And this resulted in declining quality in traditional journalism and raised concerns over trust. So everything starts with this. In the meantime, what happened? Social media platforms emerged and our user behavior started to change. Social media platforms being the primary source for publishers for a long period of time now no longer serve that role as effectively. Search engines, especially Google, used to be the reliable gateway for web content for news outlets are no longer there anymore. And people are now, as you were saying, exposed to either mainstream, overly politicized media where the information is mostly biased, or they completely avoid news, particularly the younger generation. I think last time I checked this, probably it was the Reuters Institute for Journalism's report. The news avoidance in Europe is at 36%, and I'm sure it is increasing. So people started to get their news through social media via news influencers, some of whom, if not many, have no journalistic background or training. Right? Some social media also changed the way policymakers interact with journalists as well. This is on the side. So these social media channels also, let me also mention this, there are obviously social media channels that are owned by media outlets. And then we have the news influencers on social media, on Substack, etc. And they are getting traction. Your question about whether they will become as popular as we see in the US, probably, but it will depend on the monetization. It is not easy, even for media companies who have the social media channels with millions of followers, they are not necessarily making millions or billions out of the social media communication. And let's not forget, there is the cost of living crisis for many people. So if you really want to access quality journalism, you need to pay for it. And I think we were in conversation on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, like how we are going to decide which one to pay for, right? I mean, there are so many sources and you want to support quality media, but obviously you cannot pay for everything. The only flip side I see is that there is a bit of awareness among the society in terms of media literacy. People are becoming more skeptical, etc. But it is not enough. So coming back to your initial question, I know it was a long explanation, but the future of journalism and media, I believe, will depend on two key elements. One is redefining it. So media, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that the aim is to help people navigate their lives by providing content and context. This is no longer enough. We need to look at giving different perspectives, educating people, inspiring people, and entertaining people. Of course, not every outlet will do all these things. So they need to define which battles to fight. They need to decide what their target audience needs are, listen to them, adapt them to the needs, and meet them where they are. So maybe we will see more content on social media because the people are going there more and more. And the second aspect, coming to my very initial point, the future will also depend on the innovative, creative, and diversified ways of generating revenue. I think without getting these two right, the future of media, news media, will not be as bright as I would dream of. I would dream it to be, basically.
Yeah, I think we're going to see some kind of fragmentation with individuals becoming more and more important. So, how connected they remain with different channels, I think, is still to be seen. But we talked about channels, and I want to ask you the question that I like to discuss with my the people I'm interviewing, which is, what is your feeling about the fragmentation of channels? The classic story is we used to have Twitter. That used to be the place for all the EU discussions and policy and stuff like that. Now it's X. It's become this political creature owned by Elon Musk, who's going through issues clearly. And basically, the trust in the platform has gone down significantly. However, people have not abandoned it. We've seen it, and now it's kind of back in some respect because it's so important to the US administration. So, it's not about to disappear, but we now have Blue Sky, we have LinkedIn, we have Mastodon. So personally, where do you like to spend time? And from the EU perspective, which platforms do you think emerge, and or is it like a big mix? So what's your feeling on the channel mix of 2025?
Well, I think it's it is really not that easy to decide which platforms to be more vocal, to be more visible, because as you say, things are changing so fast. I mean, a couple of months ago, we were all bashing X and we were abandoning it completely. And now we're looking back to get some information, especially from the US. Blue Sky being promising in the beginning, just like any other social media platform. I think in the bubble, we have a group of people that are like early adapters, and I see myself also as one of them. And I like to really test platforms. And but I don't necessarily actively participate in conversations. LinkedIn, I see for professional reasons, absolutely. And for my learning experience, I definitely love it. Uh, but of course, the taste is completely different compared to what you get from X and or Blue Sky. And I like it for that purpose as well, because I don't want to. I think what I'm trying to do personally is to be in a kind of a diet that is healthy, with a healthy mix. And I don't want to overly give myself to just one platform for
Mm.
also one main reason, because these platforms change their structures, algorithms, and we see also ownerships time to time. So just focusing on one single platform might not be the best way. It is like investment, right? You wouldn't put all your money in one basket. So you need to diversify. So I think it is key. The key is, first of all, to understand the dynamics of each platform and then deciding that you want to be there or not. And the decision would probably come whether your target audience is there or not. I think it's for all the EU policy comms people. This should be the case. If the policymakers are still actively on X, I think
Mm.
there is a point and value to be there. If they are communicating heavily more on LinkedIn, then you would switch. But that's how I see it personally. I really like to, as I said, limit my time on certain platforms or kind of make a conscious choice. For instance, for Blue Sky, I'm only following media professionals. So I
Mhm.
said, okay, this is my crew there. I'm going to follow what is happening in media landscape through this channel. On LinkedIn, I have the comms, EU comms bubble mostly, and I love it, and that gives me another value. I am on personal purposes, personal life purposes. I like still Instagram, and it used to be Facebook for me, and I switched to Instagram
Mm.
for really catching up with friends and family and so on. But more than that, I mean, apart from these social media channels, I really consume content through newsletters, podcasts, and YouTube videos, like podcast in video formats. So those are my main sources of consuming both news content, but also any other content that I like to really follow.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I like the idea of this. What's your optimal diet for
Mhm,
information?
mhm,
And I think, for me, um, it's been very interesting. I like to have, when I was a student, I used to read, all the papers, and I had, I would take 4 or 5. I've stayed kind of, read. I'm still subscribed to the Economist and the FT
mhm,
for quality, and then I have all my kind of traditional media apps that I just check to read news. But I do find that, for example, podcasts, things like The Rest is Politics US, or The Rest is History, very interesting takes on different topics. And you kind of go like, okay, if there's a story I want to understand, I'm going to hear that perspective, because I don't know, it feels it's going to give me something different than just reading the kind of op-eds in traditional media. And then in terms of the channels, I think LinkedIn is indeed kind of becoming, I think, core in
mhm,
Brussels, because of this overlap between professional networking, some discussions about comms and AI and other topics, and it's kind of like a trusted space. And yeah, X, I find it's. I mean, I don't know what the strategy was about from Elon Musk trying to get Trump elected. But interestingly, they have very good threads, I find. Like some
mhm,
people who create a kind of story on a topic, it can be on history or whatever, and it's kind of well constructed. So there seems to be a practice, and that I find kind of interesting.
mhm,
And then Blue Sky, I think I'm like you, I'm trying to figure out where the niches are. I think the starter packs, which is something that you can take to follow people in a category, is quite useful. Mastodon has kind of not really gained enough traction
Yeah.
to have a critical mass. And then, as you said, you mentioned newsletters. I think this is really quite important. What I would love to have is a kind of really nice tool to organize all my newsletters so they don't come into the emails, and it's kind of, I think that's missing. So any developer out there, please create a really simple thing so I can see all my newsletters, I can read them, I can see which ones I haven't read, and then the link to the podcast. So I think it's that mix that we have to look at, and it's just not anymore reading back to back full newspapers or magazines. I think it's really, we all switch between these different things. Now,
Yes.
one of the big issues that people are very concerned about with their news diet is, of course, disinformation and misinformation, which it does happen on social media. It also gets amplified by traditional media from time to time. So what is your sense of whether disinformation, misinformation is becoming more of a problem? I don't know if you recall this, but before the election, the EU election, people were saying, oh my God, maybe AI is going to create these massive disinformation campaigns. I don't really think we've seen that, but where do you think we are in terms of disinformation? How threatening and dangerous is it for democracy? Is it getting worse or better?
I don't think it's getting, I mean, wherever, in the whole history, I think when you look at it, and misinformation, disinformation have always been there.
Mhm.
Wherever there is a story, right? It's distorted, it's told differently from one person to the other. So I don't think it is going to go anywhere. Where I see and I don't really blame traditional media, news media, for that. Of course, media has big responsibility in helping people make sense of the world and providing fact-based, up-to-date information and context. And in an ideal world, you would expect media to offer a full spectrum of views so that you make your mind in the most informed way possible with minimum chance for disinformation, misinformation. But of course, we're not living in an ideal world, especially with AI, with the deep fakes, etc. I don't think it is going to go anywhere anytime soon. On the contrary, I think it will be even more amplified. The key here is, I believe, lying on the responsibility on the shoulders of the consumers. Let me put it like that. If we cannot see the full picture at one-stop shop and we are exposed to disinformation, misinformation, etc., we really need to be more media literate. And I think the responsibility starts with the states on education systems, etc., but also on the individuals. And I see that there is a bit of development. People are now highlighting when they see a fake news and they're just saying that don't go there, don't watch it, don't give clicks or views, etc. That is good, and I really want to see more of this sentiment. And without media literacy, I don't think there is any other way. Of course, fact-checking platforms, they are crucial for news outlets. AI also can help a lot with that, but I think the responsibility for combating, like fighting against fake news, is a shared one, both on the shoulders of the states, governments, the education system, on the news media outlets, but also on the consumers' shoulders. We all need to be vigilant. We need to be very careful with not necessarily just consuming it, but also not amplifying it.
Yeah, and so for me, AI is really interesting in the disinformation conversation, because it was really about this big discussion before the elections that said, oh my God, we're gonna have deep fakes everywhere. We won't know what to do. And I'm actually finding that AI is a really useful tool to fact check stories. If you
Exactly.
get your WhatsApp message from your crazy uncle and you just drop it into a good AI tool and you say, well, can you fact check this? And it immediately tells you, look, this has been proved as a hoax, blah, blah, and you can just answer. And I'm doing this a lot of the time, and I find that, despite hallucinations and the fact that you can't rely 100% on AI, it has this kind of automatic function of fact checking. So I feel this is quite interesting. And then the kind of really ironic thing is that if you go to X and you have Grok, which is the AI platform of X and Elon Musk, which has now purchased X or in some complicated transaction that I'm not sure what it reveals. But you basically get a tweet or a post, and you can just click on Grok, and then Grok will, within the Twitter or X app, and then it'll fact check that tweet or that piece of content. And it does a remarkably good job. And I was discussing this with some previous guests. And essentially, when Elon Musk posts something crazy and you go to Grok and you check, it will say this has been demonstrated as fake and exaggerated and all that. So it's not the kind of thing. So I find that the idea of having AI as a fact checker, I suspect that it might, in the long run, again, this is me being an optimist, actually help people to educate themselves on fact checking hoax. And there's another story that I posted, or I was discussing online, where they've seen that people who believe in conspiracy theories, if they use AI, are actually going to be less likely at the end of a long conversation with ChatGPT to believe in those conspiracy theories. So I think the optimist in me says AI could actually play a significant part in helping us to address fake news. What are your thoughts on that?
I think exactly it could serve both, basically. First, creating the AI generated fake content, but also identifying those whatever creations, content, whether they're being faked or not. I think the question is here is who controls the AI platform and what sort of data the infrastructure is fed with. You know what I mean? So it's human created at the end of the day, right? So AI gets content from certain sources, if not the whole internet, and I don't think it is the case. So it is human created. So if you feed the AI with content maybe that are already fake, and then you ask the content whether it is fake or not, then the result would be maybe real because the infrastructure is fake. You know what I mean? So I think we still need to go a long way to fully get the real picture of what the AI can do or not. And we need to, I think, start also questioning where the data comes for this AI, LLM, etc. So these are the questions that we will be asking to us. I think I joined this conversation. I listened to a keynote speech a couple of months ago given by David Rowan, the former editor-in-chief of the Wired magazine in the UK. And he was saying that the AI will be like electricity. It will be so kind of integral to our day-to-day lives, and we will not even notice that we need it or we use it, etc. So we're going in that direction. So it's not going to go anywhere, but the way we will interact with it, the way it will be kind of built up will be depending a lot on the intentions of the people that are creating it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, true. But the test I would do, and I do this from time to time, which is, again, you use Grok, and I'm not using that regularly. I use OpenAI and Gemini and things like that. If you use Grok and you ask it who spreads the most disinformation on X, it answers Elon Musk, Donald Trump, RFK.
Really? Okay, I never tried it.
That's so you can ask. I had a whole stream of conversation. The other thing was to say, is Elon Musk consistent in his claim that he's a free speech absolutist, given his views of China? And it said, no, he's contradicting himself. There's no. It's like it was really not what Elon Musk wanted, and that's why I thought this is really interesting, because I don't think an AI platform works if they try to control it too much. I think that completely destroys the integrity of the platform, because then the reliability is really bad. And this is why I think the Grok works like that. So it almost feels like it's the opposite side of X,
Checks and
and yet it's
balances.
fed
Yeah.
on X. So it's really interesting, and that's again why I think that it might be the business model of these AIs that kind of need to fact check, because if the AI doesn't fact check, then how can you can't use it, and you certainly can't use it for more profound purposes. But on the topic of AI and journalism, I mean, of course, there's the other side, which is AI going to, and ChatGPT and things like, is that going to replace certain forms of journalism? Because we've seen, I think some people have started to create, AI generated news, AI generated summaries, podcasts, etc. So, where do you see AI and journalism, living together, or is it an existential threat to some forms of journalism, or are you optimistic about the future and journalists use it or don't use it? I know that at Politico, they cannot use AI to write. I was told by one of the journalists they have a specific contractual rule: you cannot use ChatGPT or any other LLMs to write your content. So where do you think, which I think doesn't make sense in the long term, because it's like at some point you can, it's just checking your thing, improving your style or whatever. But what is your feeling about, how AI helps or hinders journalism in the future?
Well, I think when I look at everything happening, I feel like adaptability is the name of the game at the moment. So, not approaching AI in a reactive, resistant way, but more in a curious way. This is how I look at it. And last week, I joined this online conversation with this gentleman called Sandro Inguscio. So he is the chief digital officer at Ringier Media. It's a Swiss media company. And then he said something that I will continue using. So the media industry is now in post-social, post-search, and post-link era. So what do we mean by that? Like post-social, meaning publishers can no longer rely on platforms like Facebook and X, Twitter for distribution, right? And the social as a traffic source is in huge decline. So there is that. Post-search, publishers are losing visibility and traffic from search because people start to use the AI platforms more. So we are rethinking of these SEO-centric strategies because of that. And now we also see post-link, basically the traditional model of open web based on hyperlinks, where users go to from one news website to the other, is fading away. So we need to understand that these new AI tools, what these new AI tools are bringing to journalism, and approach them with full curiosity rather than really denial and harsh confrontation, in my view, because it's not going to go anywhere, first of all. And with AI in journalism, I really see a lot of benefits. But don't get me wrong, I really don't think the writing element, the core journalism will be, I don't think it will be replaced by AI. The way of journalistic thinking, etc., will, I believe, stay at least for a long period of time. But we see a lot of benefits from, data gathering, data analysis about audiences, about, long reports, etc., the audience behavior, their preferences, to translation of documents, offering more personalized content, boosting the engagement with the users, and even on the business side, a lot of AI generated advertising delivery, targeting, and so on. So we will continue seeing all these things. Again, it will not fully replace the editorial judgment or the societal role of journalism, in my view, but they will offer a more valuable set of tools that will scale up the impact of journalism, quality journalism. The fundamentals still will apply: clear storytelling, factual accuracy, ethical standards, and these are, I think, non-negotiable for journalism. What is changing is, I believe, how we reach people and how we keep their attention, but also capture their intention. So as I said earlier, we need to look at redefining the purpose of journalism, how we're addressing the needs of the users, how we reach them, where we reach them. So for me, formats matter, the tone matter, engagement strategies matter, but at the core, it is about trust, And in the world of this content overload, audiences are looking for clarity, not just speed, I believe. So if the journalists and media professionals, again, I cannot really speak on behalf of journalists, but if media industry professionals, if we can combine this, the agility, technical agility, with deep understanding of the purpose of our publications, we will then, I think, remain relevant, not only relevant, but also indispensable. So I really see, I'm optimistic. I think there is a lot to benefit from for the media outlets, but also for the users of quality media outlets, thanks to AI.
Okay. So with all these changes, when you meet somebody in Place Lux and they just recently graduated and they say, I don't know what to do with my life, what is your advice to them? What are the things,
Mhm.
the most important things you think they should focus on?
Oh God. I've been asked to give advices to younger professionals more often than before these days. And then I remember my younger self and how much I hated to get advice from other people and how much I did not pay attention to what they were saying and just did what I wanted to do. But jokes aside, I really don't want to give too practical advice to anyone, because for me, the key is, first of all, staying, I think, curious,
Mhm.
because things are changing so fast. We cannot really prepare ourselves way in advance for certain jobs, because yeah, they may not be there in the next 2 3 years, you know what I mean? So staying curious, following what is happening, like if you are interested in something specific, then you can really go in that direction and get more information about it. Also, not limit yourself in specific roles, so just open up your mind, because media, especially for comms and media world, every single period there are new jobs that you've never heard of before. So really staying curious is number one lesson that I learned myself and I'm confidently sharing. The second thing is, I think, being useful to people. Whatever you do in life, you need to find a way to be useful, either with professional purposes or with personal interactions, so that people can trust you, and kind of combining it with your developing your own voice whenever you are supporting people. And lastly, maybe this would be the most practical one I can share: investing in your human skills, like soft skills. Really, you may be great at whatever you study, be it social sciences, communications, or STEM, etc. You can be great at what you do, but if you don't know how to communicate it, how to sell your ideas to other people, how to critically think on certain things, how to connect the dots, like having the systems thinking ability, without those human skills or soft skills, however we like to call them, it will be really tough to stay kind of agile. Let's put it like that.
Excellent. No, very, very good. Love it. Stay curious. Also one of my favorites. So now we have time for some recommendation.
Recommendations of the week.
So what is your recommendation for our listeners and viewers?
So I picked this book for us, Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is the Massage. So this is a book from 1967. So Marshall McLuhan was a pioneer in media theory. He was best known for his revolutionary work on how media and technology shape human perception, communication, and culture. And this particular book, The Medium is the Massage, he's playing with the word massage instead of message. This is also a big theory of his. He's highlighting how media not only deliver content, but actively shape our perceptions, senses, behaviors, and society as a whole. And the fact that this is written in 1960s, it really feels like his insights really feel prophetic for our age. So without knowing the new names of social media, smartphones, algorithmic content, etc., he puts a lot of gems into this book. And it's also a visually, I can say, experimental work. It's co-created with a graphic designer.
Okay.
In that sense, it's less of a traditional book, but more of a, I think, illustrated manifesto. I think that would be the best description. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I didn't hear about that. So, and I love the title. Very, very memeable. I feel,
Exactly.
it works in the age of social media. My recommendation this week is for everyone to watch season 3 of White Lotus, which is in Thailand. I'm actually getting to the end soon. It'll be finished by the time this comes out. Basically, if you like the first 2 of the White Lotus, this is great. There's a darker vibe to it and a kind of more intensity, which I think it's very good. But anyway, very interesting, kind of slightly disturbing as always, but lots of fun. So that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your recommendations. I will see you online and in person possibly. So thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the ZNL podcast. Did you like it? If so, please share it on your social media, subscribe, and give us a comment. We will see you again on the next episode. Until then, remember, stay always one step ahead.